I found out that my wife had cuckolded me with a Belgian. I'd mixed feelings. I was shattered and betrayed, but at the same time, a burning desire for revenge was growing inside me. I decided to forgive her, but only to avenge her in my own way. This is a story about a dramatic twist of fate and difficult moral choices. In today's society, infidelity is not uncommon. I had that experience myself 12 years ago. There is a certain bar from which one can already look down. In my case, my wife's infidelity had a continuation as sincere remorse, allowing me to make an attempt to move on. Without remorse, in my opinion, it's not worth even trying to waste time. My wife and I still refer to those dinosaurs, when I was her first, and she was my first. So to speak, we studied each other and went on with our lives, though we formalized our relationship only with the birth of a child. I don't know if it is like that now or not, but it was like that for us, and I didn't just appreciate it. It was like a granite monument inside of me that all the domestic turmoil I thought was shattering. That's not to say the relationship was cloudless. There were always plenty of life's jams, and even some really big ones. But we tried, and we lapped it up. Time passed, and we grew up. Thanks to both of our parents, we had a small place to live. We both worked, had a baby, a girl. We lived together for 3 years. By that time, we planned to build our own house, bought a plot with a barn, and built most of it with our own hands. For as a young family with finances, though I had a micro business, but always in a pinch, although I never lived in want or on credit, my wife, by this time, had gotten quite a cash job, which allowed me to get into construction faster, and here our relationship began to deteriorate rapidly. I put down to not finishing the child, lack of sleep, the arrogance of the received position. This went on for almost 3 years. I earned money and built a new family nest. But we stuck together less and less often. She kind of put the baby to sleep and fell asleep on her own. I wrote it off to hard work, nervous breakdowns, phases of the moon, and magnetic storms. All attempts to talk ended with nothing. It should be noted here that my wife is a quiet person. We never have tantrums or scandals. She just doesn't talk as she was not taught to speak when she was a child. All attempts to solve crises have always come from me. But in these 3 years, I relaxed with it. Our relationship was 7 years old by the time we started building. I was somewhat tired of pulling out my wife's pincers and teeth. Teeth accumulated problems and disagreements. Such a procedure took a lot of time and mental energy. In fact, I was pregnant with what I considered my family. And the family was 80% wife. The baby was still young. I thought that my energies threatened for this family were valued by my wife as for her. How wrong I was. I should add that there was almost no reason to suspect her of infidelity. She didn't stay late at work, didn't go out much. Although if I had been the way I am now, she would have spoiled very quickly. But then I had rose-colored glasses, the granite of innocence, a friend and family companion. So one day, when the relationship had come to a standstill and realizing that talking wouldn't work, I took to writing her an email. With questions about our relationship, see dumb text with options for answers. I got an answer. And only after that we had our first conversation, as I thought heart to heart. And right away, I want to point out, if you think that a cornered woman will tell you the whole truth, you're deeply mistaken. From the conversation, it turned out that my wife was cheating on me. To say that it was a shock, it is nothing to say. Even now it hurts a lot, and it has been 12 years. The pain is crushing to the heels and all the other niceties. After talking to her, she saw that pain, and something in her kind of cleared up. Our relationship was even restored in some way. The adultery was presented as a one-time drunken binge at some corporate party. I couldn't remember any of that, though. She didn't drink that much. The subject was stale, although I tried to reach out and understand how this was possible, but in vain. I also learned that she'd already filed for divorce. It was decided to forgive and forget everything and move on. Friendly and happy. Took the application. Spring and summer passed with varying success and even long-forgotten great sex. Autumn came. For part of the summer, I went on business trips for weeks at a time. In the fall, I noticed a new tension, and as a surprise after my daughter's birthday, I was told we had to separate. Without explanation, after which she took the baby and left the house for her mother. To say that I was stunned, that's nothing to say. The next day, I drove to my mother-in-law's house. As I thought, I had a frank talk with her. I took my daughter and went to the zoo. I also invited my wife there for a talk. She came in all upset, said she only needed me, and she was kind of stressed. I couldn't get anything more coherent than that. We went home. We went happily ever after for a week. And I had to go away on a business trip for a couple of weeks while I was away. We, communicated quite normally over the internet. She was bored waiting. I noticed behind me that I didn't really want to go back so soon. Work became more pleasant than such a chapeau at home. Just years. Bored wife, great sex, overly attentive. Frankly, it was very tense and thought-provoking. And then a week or two later, I got a messenger message in my ICQ. If you remember EQ. Some guy was knocking on the door, like chatting. Checked his IP number. And he's Christian Europe. I remember something in English. So, about nothing. Gisha. Peter the weather. And in the end gives me my residential address, which is not even on the map. And here my hair stood on end. At this point, the communication was over. Again, vague doubts. I drove home, put my wife up against the wall, and was interrogated. The interrogation went on intermittently for several weeks, with a lot of additional lies. Sexual. Along the way, all the browser cache on her computer was checked. Her email account was intercepted. Along the way, the guy kept dudding me, sending me pictures, letters, texts. I gotta hand it to him. He didn't lie to me even once and turned out to be 43 years old Belgian. She was about 30 at the time. I'm just Nail. We met online, when she was at home with her daughter, before she got a new, not bad in terms of money job. Daughter was about a year and a half. There was nothing to do. She was learning English, and then a teacher came along. We corresponded for about half a year, and we arranged a meeting in St. Petersburg. It was 5,000 come away from us. If anything, by that time, she had just been hired, and I was happy for her. She told me she was going on a business trip for 3 days. We met, rented an apartment, had interspersed sex with sightseeing. 3 days later, she arrived happy with her life. Filtered pictures. He sent me the missing one and showed me the Hermitage. Life went on. I did not see anything. I didn't even think that way. I stayed with my daughter and built a house. It was good that my mother helped. Relationships slowly deteriorated further, but by and large, they were bearable. I wrote it all up to the new job, lack of sleep, the baby, and the unsettled situation. It's been almost a year or less. I am presented with the news that she almost gave by chance acquaintance. Brought up a tour to Europe for 10 days, and kind of stupid not to take advantage of it. I expressed my dissatisfaction, said that I do not understand it, but my wife ignored and left. I was left with the baby and the construction, grateful to my mother for her help. In fact, my wife went to the same man in Belgium, then came back right at the airport, made a scandal that I did not meet her there, although I waited there for 3 hours. Her flight was late. I wish I'd thought about it, not a single text message on the whole trip. It wasn't a bell anymore, it was a bell. But again, I didn't notice. The relationship catastrophically continued to deteriorate. None of attempts to reach out to talk were successful, until I wrote that ill-fated test for my wife. After that, I had a kind of frank conversation in which a lie was told. In the following 6 months, this lie was partially refined, expanded. In fact, at the time of sending my ill-fated test, my wife to live together was preparing for a divorce and taking the child abroad without my consent, preparing for division of property. She even changed her last name to her maiden name and filed for divorce. For the Behorny, rather fat prince at this point sort of got a divorce. In fact, it later turned out that his wife left him, for he got even a freely liked Belgian woman. Now I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't written that letter. That email or the conversation wouldn't have worked out. Maybe ruined my wife's happiness with a Belgian prince, but then I would have lost my daughter forever. Losing my wife at this time would have been more of a blessing. If I had known all at once, yes, it would have been hard, but it would have been logical and understandable. I think there are a lot of cases like that, but fate had it differently. The wife had something, and she tried, but still ended the affair. Then the prince expressed his desire to come to our city. A millionaire in Western Siberia. She wrote to the consulate not to give him a visa, dissuaded him, but eventually the prince ended up in our city just a few days into the fall. He flew in the day after his daughter's birthday, so his wife left at that time with no explanation. But something went wrong with my wife, which is a mystery to me, by the way, to this day. In the end, my wife's parents hid the prince in their dacha until I left on a business trip. As it turned out later, my mother-in-law had been aware of the events for quite a long time, keeping her in correspondence with the prince. He then forwarded me some of the most heartfelt her texts to me, with the wishes to stay on the track. One day, the prince showed up at our house and almost burned my sweetheart. I left, The prince was pampered. The prince was taken to local attractions, theaters, and picnics. His wife said she would not go with him, bought him a ticket on her grandmother, and sent him to the capital, and having calmed down, began to wait for me from the business trip. After he came out on me in Esk, and the conversation with my wife, for a month I remember as if in a fog. She gave me lie after lie, sent my wife for tests, but they did not find anything. The active phase ended there. Well, what began another word like madhouse? I guess you cannot call it. No, I wonder why I didn't go to an empty apartment, even without an official divorce and separation. Just to sit back and come to my senses, to figure out if I need something here or not. Skipping a little bit to say that the situation was not a childish one, and for both of us. I don't know what would have to happen to a woman to do something like that and then try to take it all back afterwards. In fact, she lost 10 pounds in a couple of weeks. Over the next 6 months, she lost the job she had been striving for half her life, and not because the prince had sent intimate pictures of her there. She lost the job she'd been striving for half her life, and not because the prince had sent intimate pictures of her there, but because the joints on the joints actually went. I nagged her for weeks. It's been 12 years since then. We have 2 more daughters born and growing up, 3 in total. And unfortunately, my wife did not carry 1 child. I will write in more detail in the conclusions. We bought a house in the countryside and often live there. The family is friendly, household joints are but solved. Sex with his wife was just a fairy tale. I never had anything like this even when I was young. Immediately after what happened, she was set a few axioms. She no longer had any rights over me in terms of my relationship with anyone. Any excuse for getting knocked up or skiing leads automatically to the breakup of the relationship. Second, my mother-in-law is no longer a part of our home, but she can occasionally communicate with my granddaughter on her property. 7 years later, the mother-in-law has left this world. My wife thinks she is to blame for her death, the death of an unborn child and an abortion when she and I were green and pregnant when she was young. Was wildly afraid of her mother, she went for an abortion and I didn't stop her. This guilt complex, plus the cheating, dropped her self-esteem below the baseboard, and I can see it starting to destroy her. And for the most part, I wasn't the one who instilled it in her. Somehow, incomprehensibly, she realized it all on her own, and I won't do anything about it. Dear friends, it would be very interesting to hear what you think about this story in the comments. Communicating with you, I really enjoy it. Like and subscription is the best way to thank you for our efforts. See you soon.